Headless Spokesman by Irvin Mattick. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Dale Grothman. A Short and Terrible Tale of Murder. The Headless Spokesman by Irvin Mattick. For the sixth time, Slater looked at the clock on the shelf. He took the axe from his knees and tiptoed across the rough floor of the cabin to a door of the adjoining room. Listening intently, he heard the deep breathing of a drunken man sleeping within. 20 minutes had passed now since his son Drayton and old settler Hurd had tottered across the big mess room of the hut, and each gone, dead drunk, to his own room to sleep off the hooch they had guzzled. The three men had celebrated the lordly haul of pan gold they had washed from the river that winter. In little sacks the dust and pebbles of the precious metal were stacked under the boards of the mess room floor. Slater had put up to his son the proposition of removing old Hurt, but the son had refused to kill, had even winced at being the accomplice to such an affair. So old man Slater gathered the three of them that night in a drinking bout. He sipped tea from a bottle. Slater had watched his son Drayton, who was unaware of his father's murderous plan, drink the hooch with settler Hurt from the big jug until the two men were beyond their senses and had reeled to their separate bunk chambers. And now, the axe in his hands, Slater stood before old Hurt's door, listening. Why should Hurt have 1/3 of the gold, when Slater and his own boy could have each 1/2 of it? What if Drayton was afraid to kill Hurt? A shot, a gun accidentally discharged, a razor-lipped axe falling from a bracket, and old Slater had chosen the axe. 20 minutes was an ample time for a boozed man to be fast asleep. Slater was now inside Hurt's room, closing the door behind him as cautiously and soundlessly as he had opened it. The room was inky black with the darkness, but a bit of good fortune was with Slater. Through a tear in the window shade of heavy paper, a single strip of moonlight shone, and this fell straight across the sleeping bunk. The sleeper's face was turned from Slater, and the moon lay approximately on the sun-browned nape of the drunken man's neck, just below the unkempt fringe of hair on his head. Slater raised the keen axe to his shoulder and slipped toward the snoring man on the rough wooden bunk, to within a full swing of the weapon. Like a huge chalk mark, the moon drew its white death line across the sleeping man's neck, and the next second a purplish froth bubbled in that line of light. Slater yanked the heavy axe from its dent in the bunk board. With another swing of the chopper, he left a blood-weltering slot between the head and the body. Then he stepped back to watch the gore from the torso mix with the oozing from the head arteries. A coagulating mass boiled and sputtered about the ribbon of moonlight where Slater had struck and beheaded a man. Then Slater turned to re-enter the big mess room. He wanted to pull up the floorboards and estimate very carefully the gold which now belonged half to himself and half to his son. Someone knocked outside on the door to the cabin. Slater viewed the decapitated body on the bunk, then stepped back to the mess room. He saw the bottle partially filled with brown liquid next to a fat-bellied jug on the table. He started to take these away when the knock on the door was repeated. "Who's out there?" "Me, Slater. I just came up from the Forks to borrow some of your flour." Slater opened the door and admitted Yank DeParrott, another prospector in the region, who camped 3 miles downstream. DeParrott walked straight to the table with the jug and bottle, and with a smile of greeting on his weathered face, he tipped the bottle to his lips and sucked one big mouthful from the neck, then turned and spouted the liquor from his teeth. "Damn it, what a swill! Pew!" Slater saw that Duperret had taken a swig of the stale tea. "That's tea, neighbor. Whiskey's in the jug." "Tea?" "Yeah, I drink it sometimes." "And do you bottle it?" "When I make too much at a time, yes." Slater fidgeted a bit, trying hard to conceal his agitation. In the dim light from the single oil lamp on a bracket near the fireplace, the men looked silently at each other, only as men can look at each other in company where gold is scratched from the earth, and hidden again in rude huts where other men cannot find it. A door was banged shut in the cabin, and Slater stole a guarded glance in the direction of his son's bunk room. Then Duperret laughed. "I know you've got a fortune hidden here somewhere, but I'm not after it. Flour is what I want. And I'll test the jug, too." Duperret put the nose of the jug to his lips, turned back his head, and let a few gulps of the hooch gurgle into his throat. "That's more like it," Duperret exclaimed as he put down the whiskey, satisfied. Slater shifted uneasily. He tried with his nostrils to smell if there was a trace of gore in the cabin. "Now, Slater, you let me have some flour, and I'll clean for home. My stuff's coming up from the post in 3 days, and I'll fetch it back to you then. And say, by the way, I dropped my axe into the slough this morning, and I'm out of wood. I see you're supplied for a time. Can you give me your chopper a few days?" Slater went to the covered box in the mess room and dipped some flour with his hands into an empty cartridge box. He was trying to think of a way to get the axe cleaned in Hertz's room before handing it to Duperret. Why, here was an opportunity. The devil spawned a scheme in the prospector's brain. Duperret, here in Hertz's cabin, just after the murder, his wheel tracks in the mud, the axe red with Hertz's blood, found in Duperret's wagon. They weren't so technical up here in the Pan Country. Everybody knew that Duperret was poor, and that there was gold aplenty in Hertz's cabin. The axe and the murder and Duperret's wagon tracks, it would look mighty funny. A smile crept through Slater's countenance, but died before it reached his eyes. "Sure thing, Duperret. You can have my axe as soon as I tie up this box. By George, there's no string in the house. I strung it all up on a nail out in the stable. Take the lamp out and get me a couple of pieces for this box. I'll put the axe in your wagon while you're gone." Duperret took the oil lamp from its bracket and went to the stable for the length of string. Slater made sure Duperret was far enough toward the stable not to catch sight of the smear on the axe blade when he should run out with it to the wagon and put it under the seat. In the darkness, Slater ran to Hertz's door. As he opened it, he looked instantly toward the bunk where he had left the murdered man bleeding. Settler Hertz's body was gone from the bunk. In the full glare of the moon, now that the paper shade had been torn away from the window, Slater saw a pool of black, glistening matter stain the bunk boards at about the spot where a man's head would have been severed with the axe. But the bunk was unoccupied. Slater backed through the door, away from Hertz's room. As he reached the center of the mess room, Hertz's voice came deeply with a grave tremor from the shadowy doorway of the sleeping chamber. "Milton Slater!" Duperret, returning now from the stable, the chimney lamp flickering in the wind, called to Slater as he neared the door of the cabin. "There ain't no string out there, Slater." "Milton Slater," Settler Herd's deep-toned voice boomed again in the darkness. Duperret came in and put the lamp on the table. He saw Slater in the middle of the room, pale and trembling. Then Duperret looked toward the doorway from which Settler Herd had just called. In that oblong of darkness, the light from the smoking lamp chimney dimly lighting the gruesome thing, stood a headless body. It dangled heavily and awkwardly, as if weary from being propped up on its limp, rubbery legs. The top of the neck, a raw stump budding up from the bloody-shirted shoulders, was a horrible mass. A giant mushroom, it seemed, with a pastry coagulation of its life-blood swollen and fringed about the headless stump. Just beyond the door, the awful thing swayed unsteadily, and then from its invisible throat came Settler Hurt's stentorian voice. "Milton Slater, I have returned from the dead. I have come back from hell, from my bunk where you slew me. I have risen to accuse you of murder." Duparrot saw Slater fall to his knees, saw his face turn stony and his body shiver with a terror that transformed the brawny prospector to an abject, shriveling coward. "Milton Slater!" Hurt's words came as if from the pit of a grave. "I come to throw the proof of your crime at your feet. Here, in the presence of one who will see that you are punished. Milton Slater, stand up." Slater was groveling now, clutching at the floor as one saving himself from drowning. "Milton Slater!" the headless body shouted. "Stand up! This is your hour of judgment." Terrorized, Duparrot helped Slater. Slowly the man raised himself from the floor, but shut his eyes, put his arms before them, and stood shuddering against the far wall of the mess room, straight across from the specter that confronted him. "Look at me!" the headless corpse commanded. Slater kept his eyes covered. "Milton Slater, you coward! Look at me now!" The man took his arms from his face, but held his eyes shut. "Look at me!" the headless specter screamed. Slowly, Slater opened his eyes and gazed at the awful thing. Then he picked at his face with ungoverned hands. "Put down your hands, Slater!" the decapitated corpse shouted. "I can see you without my head. Put down your hands!" Slater put his weaving arms down at his side. Duparrot beheld the sinister tableau. Then the voice of Settler Hurt boomed forth again with the finality of conviction. "Milton Slater, now you shall be punished. Stand still and look." A moment of silence hung in the dimly lit cabin door. Then an axe swung out from Hurt's room. Through the air it flew, and clattered to the floor at Slater's feet. "That's the axe you killed me with, Slater. Let Duparrot use it, but ask him first if he wants an axe that you swung clear through my neck. Through this neck you see now. Ask him, Slater." Duparrot saw the brown stain on the axe wedge. Another minute of silence ensued. Then Slater put up a whimper. Suddenly, a spherical thing, a lopsided ball with a matting of hair, was shot out over the headless body. From the doorway of Hurt's chamber it came, flying straight at Slater. The thing hit with a thud on the wall just above Slater's head. Then it came down, bounced on Slater's shoulder, and bumped to the floor. As the unwieldy shape hit the hard floorboards, it split open like a melon. Duparrot cried out. "Slater, for Christ's sake, that's Drayton's head on the floor. That's your son's head, Slater." Slater shrieked and covered his eyes. When Duparrot again looked toward the doorway, the headless corpse was on the floor. Settler Hurt, gigantic, black with rage, his knotted arms bare and menacing, stood in the mess room beside the body. Slater was on the floor whining, clutching the hair of his son's shattered head. Then Settler Hurt let loose his words. "Duparrot, he wanted the gold for his son and himself. He got us drunk tonight, drank some fake booze, tea or coffee, himself. I and his son were so full of hooch, we got our own room doors mixed. Drayton went into my room, and I into his. I woke up and saw my mistake. Going through the door between our chambers, in my own room, I found Drayton's body on my bunk, his head severed. I tore down the paper shade to make sure I wasn't shaky from the hooch, and there I found Slater's axe. Then I knew. Slater meant to kill me, and killed his son. It sobered me, that did. After I heard you were here, I did the rest with Drayton's body in the doorway. And now, Slater! Hurt curled his lips for a final imprecation upon the murderer, but the sight before him stifled speech. Old Slater, brushing his son's head, was singing a soft lullaby with a breaking tune that betrayed departing reason. Fondling the horrid shape, he planted a kiss on his son's ghastly lips. Settler Hurt groped for the whiskey jug and gulped as he watched the man on the floor. "Leave some for me," Duparrot whispered as he put his hands on the upturned jug. The end of The Headless Spokesman by Irvin Mattick.
Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.